There are moments, subtle as the hush before dawn, when life whispers truths we've grown too busy to hear. Not in the thunder of failure, nor in the glare of success, but in the quiet dissonance between what we do and who we are becoming. Sometimes the path we walk isn't wrong in appearance. It is wrong in resonance. Like a note out of tune in the music of the soul, something feels misaligned. And though the world may cheer our progress, the heart murmurs its dissent. The universe, ever gentle and precise, offers warnings not to punish, but to redirect through restlessness, through emptiness, through the haunting feeling that something essential has been forgotten. To ignore these signs is not to fail, but to delay the sacred rhythm that longs to carry us home. Listen closely, for even missteps are choreographed in the great ballet of being. And remember, the path may twist, but the soul never truly loses its way. You see, we often mistake movement for meaning. We believe that as long as the wheels keep turning, the path must be right. We get good at performing life, at showing up, getting things done, ticking boxes. But there's a subtle kind of sorrow that creeps in when the soul is present but uninvited. It begins as a quiet unease, a kind of internal dissonance that's easy to brush off. After all, everything looks fine. From the outside, it might even look enviable. Success, structure, security. But if you sit with yourself long enough in the absence of noise and applause, you may begin to notice that something doesn't quite ring true. This dissonance is not random. It's not a bug in the system. It's the most compassionate signal life can offer you. A gentle inner tremor that says, this isn't it. And it doesn't always roar. In fact, it rarely does. It speaks in sighs and Sunday evening dread, in the hollow victory of goals achieved that leave no trace of joy. It shows up in the way your shoulders tense at the thought of another day, in the conversations you escape rather than enter, in the dreams that visit at night but are buried by morning. This is not weakness. This is your inner wisdom trying to get your attention. When the path is right, even the challenges feel aligned, like they are part of something purposeful. But when you're out of tune with yourself, even ease begins to feel oppressive. There's no pleasure in it, no resonance. You might find yourself saying, I should be happy, yet feel more like a spectator in your own life than a participant. That's not depression, that's disconnection. And if you ignore it long enough, the soul finds ways to grow louder, through fatigue, through illness, through a sudden longing to tear it all down and begin again. But don't fear these moments. They are sacred. They are not here to punish, but to reveal. They arrive not to shatter what you've built, but to return you to what you've forgotten. The truth is, your soul never agreed to a life of appearances. It was never interested in merely being functional. It came to feel, to taste, to move with depth and rhythm. And when you're off that rhythm, when you've traded your song for someone else's symphony, the body and the spirit will conspire to call you back. There is a great intelligence woven into your discontent. It doesn't want you to abandon everything. It wants you to listen. You don't have to run from the life you've created, but you do need to ask, was it built by your own hands, guided by your own light, or did you inherit a map that was never meant for your terrain? You cannot think your way into the right path. You must feel your way in. You must be brave enough to trust the quiet voice that speaks when no one else is watching. That voice is not interested in what is popular, profitable, or even predictable. It speaks only of what is real. And here's the mystery. When you begin to follow that voice, even the wrong turns start to make sense. Even the years of wandering feel necessary, because they brought you here to this moment of remembering, to this threshold where you choose not by fear, but by truth. So if your life feels out of tune, if your days feel rehearsed rather than lived, don't be afraid. The music hasn't stopped. It's just waiting for you to pick up your part again. Because the soul never forgets its melody. It only waits for you to hear it once more. There's a subtle kind of fading that can happen to a person, not all at once, but gradually, like the slow dimming of twilight before night fully arrives. And most don't even notice when it begins. You keep moving, you keep doing, you keep responding to the demands of the day. But somewhere along the way, the spark that once lit up the ordinary, the beauty in a flower, the joy in a stranger's smile, the fascination with the sky turning gold at dusk, starts to dull. And you say, well, I'm just busy, or that's life, things change. But the truth is, when wonder disappears, it's not the world that's become less magical. It's that you've drifted so far from the core of yourself that you've forgotten how to see it. You see, we were never meant to live numbly. The soul is built for awe. It was designed to marvel, to pause, to be struck silent by the sheer beauty of a moment. When a life is aligned, wonder is not something you have to chase. It arrives uninvited. You notice the breeze in your hair as a kind of blessing, the sound of rain as a conversation, the eyes of another person as portals to something vast and ancient. But when you're on the wrong path, that kind of noticing fades. The world loses its color not because it changed, but because you've stopped looking with the eyes of the soul. That's one of life's softest warnings. When you begin to pass by beauty without feeling it, when the sacred slips past you unnoticed, you no longer laugh as deeply or cry as freely. Sunsets don't move you. Music doesn't make you pause. And it's not because those things have lost their power, but because you've grown out of touch with the part of you that responds to them. This isn't about romanticizing life. It's about recognizing that the divine is always speaking, just not in the language we've been taught to value. The divine whispers through ordinary things. A child's curiosity, a bird's song, the scent of earth after rain. But you must be present to hear it. And presence, real presence, is impossible when you're sprinting toward a version of life that doesn't speak your name. The disappearance of wonder is the soul's way of asking you to slow down, to question, to remember. It's a call to stop performing and start feeling again. Because wonder doesn't arise when you reach some perfect destination. It arrives when you become fully alive where you are. And sometimes the path you're on doesn't allow for that kind of aliveness. It's too structured, too hurried, too noisy. It rewards productivity but punishes stillness. It fills your calendar but empties your spirit. And then one day you realize you can't remember the last time you looked up at the stars without a reason, or listened to a piece of music without trying to multitask through it, or sat in silence without reaching for your phone. That is not living. That is drifting. But here's the beauty. Wonder never really leaves you. It waits, patiently. It hides in plain sight, just beyond the veil of your distractions. It remains tucked inside the quiet, waiting to be felt again. All it takes is one moment, one breath, one act of surrender to the present. And the world, once faded, begins to glow again, not because it changed, but because you remembered how to see. So if the days have grown gray and the magic has gone missing, perhaps it's not the world that's grown dull. Perhaps it's simply time to come home to your eyes. Because the one who is truly awake does not need miracles, only presence and the courage to wonder again. There's a particular kind of ache that doesn't come from injury or loss. It comes from avoidance, a quiet, persistent longing that doesn't scream but never truly fades. It lives just beneath the surface of your daily routine, humming like an old song you used to love but no longer play. You tell yourself you're content, maybe even successful, but in the silence, when the world isn't asking anything of you, you feel it, the whisper of something you were meant to do, or perhaps someone you were meant to become. This longing isn't random. It's not a glitch in your mind or an ungrateful heart. It is a sacred signal, a kind of soul memory echoing through the corridors of your being, saying, you are not yet living fully. And many ignore it for years. They bury it beneath careers, relationships, expectations, even noble responsibilities. But buried seeds don't die. They wait. And this one waits with surprising patience, appearing in the moments between distraction, when you're driving alone, lying in bed, or staring at the ceiling with a strange heaviness you can't quite explain. Sometimes it comes as restlessness. Other times as envy, not of what someone has, but of who they get to be. A dancer, a poet, a teacher, a healer. You might scoff at it, call it impractical, childish, naive, but that doesn't make it disappear. That ache is the truest compass you have, not to your comfort, but to your calling. And the tragedy is not in failing to reach some grand destiny. The real tragedy is growing so accustomed to the ache that you forget it was ever a message, that you mistake its silence for peace when in fact it's resignation. You see, when you're on the wrong path, it often looks like stability. You've built a structure around you that functions, sometimes even beautifully, but it wasn't made from the raw material of your truth. It was shaped by compromise, necessity, fear, or someone else's dream. And slowly, piece by piece, you begin to vanish inside it. You show up, you play the role, but the real you, the wild, luminous core of you, goes quiet. And that's where the warning lives, in the subtle places. The sigh after a meeting, the tightness in your chest on Monday morning, the secret fantasies of walking away, not toward nothing, but toward something so honest it terrifies you. You wonder, could I really start over? Would it even matter now? Is it too late? But the soul doesn't measure time the way the world does. It doesn't care if you're 25 or 65. It only asks, are you listening now? You don't need to burn everything down to realign. Sometimes all it takes is one brave question. What part of me have I silenced to survive this version of life? And when you find that part, perhaps an artist, a seeker, a lover of the unknown, you begin the sacred work of remembering, because you were not born to be efficient. You were born to be whole, and wholeness cannot be achieved while dragging a forgotten dream behind you like a ghost. So if there's a longing inside you, persistent, tender, and quietly painful, don't rush to bury it. Sit with it. Listen to it. Let it speak in its own ancient language. It might not give you a plan, but it will give you a direction, and that's all a soul ever really needs. Because the heart doesn't ache for what it cannot have, only aches for what it was always meant to find. There's something strangely seductive about distraction. It promises relief, a momentary escape, a break from the deeper questions we're too tired or too afraid to ask. We live in a world that rewards the overstimulated mind, constant scrolling, endless updates, notifications layered on top of thoughts that were never quite finished. And while the surface stays busy, the depths grow quiet. Not quiet in the peaceful sense, quiet in the forgotten sense. You begin to drift, not toward anything meaningful, but away from everything that truly matters. When you're on the wrong path in life, it rarely feels like a dramatic collapse. More often, it feels like a slow dissolving. You feel your time, you feel your space, but you rarely feel your soul. There's always something playing in the background. Music, podcasts, news, social media, because silence has become too loud. It threatens to reveal something you don't want to confront, that the life you're building might not be your own. And it's not the distractions themselves that are the problem. It's the need for them, the compulsion to constantly be somewhere else, even while sitting in your own home, your own skin. The inability to simply be with yourself without fidgeting toward the next screen, the next plan, the next achievement. That's the warning. Not in the presence of noise, but in the fear of stillness, because stillness is where truth lives. It's where your deepest desires rise to the surface and ask to be acknowledged. It's where the soul gently taps on the door, not with demands, but with reminders of who you were before the world told you who to be. But when you're distracted all the time, you miss those moments. You override your internal signals. Fatigue becomes something you medicate, not listen to. Sadness becomes something you scroll past. Joy becomes something you schedule rather than feel. And slowly, your life begins to resemble a series of performed roles. Productive, acceptable, impressive, while the essence of you waits in the quiet, wondering when you'll remember. The wrong path is often paved with comfort, noise, and busyness. It looks safe. It looks like progress. But you can be wildly efficient in the wrong direction. You can win awards for living a life that never once asked what you actually love. And perhaps the greatest tragedy is not failing in the pursuit of your dream, but succeeding in escaping it altogether. You have to be careful with distraction because it's clever. It doesn't always look like avoidance. Sometimes it masquerades as ambition, as responsibility, as being realistic. You work harder, you earn more, you keep up, and all the while something inside you is starving. And here's the truth you can't outrun. The soul doesn't compete for your attention. It doesn't shout. It waits patiently. Through all your scrolling and striving and soothing, it waits for the moment you finally grow quiet enough to notice the ache behind your eyes, the weariness in your chest, the faint but unmistakable yearning for something real. And if you're brave enough to pause, truly pause, you'll find that everything you've been chasing in distraction already lives within you, waiting to be remembered. Not earned, not built, just remembered. So if you find yourself endlessly occupied, perpetually stimulated, yet inexplicably numb, consider this. Perhaps it's not more content you need, but more connection. Not another task, but a return to stillness, a return to the moment, a return to yourself. Because a life filled with everything except your own essence is still, in the deepest sense, empty.